The storm rolled in just after sunset, bringing with it sheets of rain that turned the dirt roads into rivers of mud. Jacob Thornwood stood at the window of his farmhouse, watching lightning crack across the Montana sky. At 6'7" and built like an oak tree, he cut an imposing figure, but his eyes were gentle as they surveyed his land. He'd worked this ranch alone for the past 5 years, ever since his father passed, and solitude had become both his companion and his curse. He was about to turn away when movement near the barn caught his eye. Through the downpour, he could barely make out a small figure darting inside. His first thought was trespassers, maybe kids from town looking for trouble. But something about the desperate way the person moved made him grab his rain jacket and head out into the storm. The barn was dark except for the occasional flash of lightning through the cracks in the wood. Jacob clicked on his flashlight, sweeping it across the hay bales and equipment. Then he heard it, a sharp intake of breath from the loft above. "I know you're up there," he called out, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to know who you are and what you're doing in my barn." Silence. Then, a small voice, trembling with cold and fear. "Please don't call the police. Please. I'll leave right now, I promise." Jacob's heart clenched. That was a young woman's voice, and she sounded terrified. He climbed the ladder slowly, announcing each step. "I'm coming up. Just want to talk, that's all." When he reached the top, his flashlight fell on a girl huddled in the corner, soaked to the bone and shivering violently. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair plastered to her pale face and wide brown eyes that held a haunted look he recognized. He'd seen that same expression in injured animals, the look of something that had been running for too long. "Jesus," he breathed, immediately shrugging off his jacket. "Here, take this. You're freezing." She flinched when he moved closer but accepted the jacket with shaking hands. Up close, he could see the bruise on her cheekbone, barely hidden by her wet hair, and the split lip that had recently bled. "What's your name?" he asked gently, sitting down several feet away to give her space. "Emma," she whispered, pulling the jacket tight around her shoulders. "Emma Cartwright." "I'm Jacob. This is my ranch. You want to tell me what you're running from, Emma?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't. You wouldn't understand. Try me." And so she did. The words tumbled out in a rush. How she'd been engaged to a man named Derek who seemed perfect at first. How his charm had slowly revealed itself to be control. How his love had turned to possession and then to violence. She'd planned her escape for months, saving every dollar she could hide, waiting for the right moment. Tonight, when he'd raised his hand to her one time too many, she'd grabbed her bag and run. She'd been hitchhiking for 2 days, and when the storm hit, she'd seen the barn and thought she could hide just until morning. "He'll be looking for me," she finished, her voice breaking. "He said he'd kill me before he'd let me leave. And his father is Sheriff Cartwright in the next county over. They'll find me. They always find people." Jacob felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He knew Sheriff Cartwright by reputation, a mean son of a bitch who thought his badge gave him the right to do whatever he wanted. And if his son was anything like him, Emma had every reason to be scared. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Get dry, get warm. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." She looked at him with such relief and suspicion mixed together that it broke his heart. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because it's the right thing to do. Come on, let's get you inside." The farmhouse was warm and simple, a bachelor's home but clean and well-maintained. Jacob showed Emma to the guest room and found some of his old shirts and sweatpants for her to wear while her clothes dried. He made hot coffee and heated up leftover stew while she showered, and when she emerged looking slightly more human, he had food waiting. They sat at the kitchen table, and Jacob watched her eat like she hadn't had a real meal in days. Probably hadn't, he realized. She looked up and caught him staring. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm eating like an animal. I just..." "Don't apologize. Eat as much as you want. There's plenty." She smiled then, small and tentative, and Jacob felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, there was a strength in her that the fear and exhaustion couldn't quite hide. She'd survived something terrible and still had the courage to run toward an uncertain future rather than stay in a familiar hell. They talked late into the night. She told him about her childhood in a small town in Wyoming, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about how Derek had isolated her from everyone she knew. Jacob told her about the ranch, about growing up without a mother, about the loneliness that had settled over his life like dust. It felt easy, natural, like they'd known each other for years rather than hours. It was almost midnight when headlights swept across the windows. Jacob went still, then moved to peek through the curtains. A sheriff's vehicle, and behind it, a black truck that looked expensive and mean. "Emma," he said quietly. "Did Derek drive a black Ford F-250? Her face went white. "Oh God! How did they find me so fast?" Jacob's mind raced. If they searched the property, they'd find her things in the guest room. If they questioned her, she'd have no good explanation for being here. And if Sheriff Cartwright wanted to drag her back to his son, there wasn't much Jacob could do legally to stop him. Unless... He turned to Emma, an idea forming that was either brilliant or insane. "Do you trust me?" I don't know. Should I?" "In about 30 seconds, those men are going to knock on my door. And when they do, if they ask, you're my wife. You've been living here for 6 months. We met online and got married quick. Understand?" Emma stared at him. "What? Why would you?" "Because a man's wife can't be forced to go anywhere she doesn't want to go. Because Cartwright might be a bully, but even he can't strong-arm a married woman away from her home without cause. And because..." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Because I'm not going to let them take you back to someone who hurt you. So what do you say? Will you be my wife for the next 10 minutes? The knock came, hard and demanding. Emma looked at the door, then back at Jacob, and made her decision. She nodded. Jacob answered the door to find Sheriff Cartwright, a thick-necked man with cold eyes, and a younger version of him that had to be Derek. The son had that same entitled sneer, the look of someone who'd never been told no in his life. "Evening, Thornwood," Cartwright said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We're looking for a young woman, Emma Cartwright. About 5'5", dark hair. You seen anyone like that around here?" "Cartwright." Jacob frowned, as if thinking. "That's your name, Sheriff. She a relative?" "My daughter-in-law," Derek spoke up, his voice tight. "She's confused, had some kind of breakdown. We're worried about her." "Funny," Jacob said slowly. "My wife's name is Emma. Emma Thornwood. But she's been here all evening with me." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cartwright's eyes narrowed. "Your wife. Since when are you married, Thornwood?" "Since about 6 months ago. We met online, got married quick. You know how it is when you meet the right person." He smiled, easy and confident. "She's from Wyoming originally. Small world, I guess." "I want to talk to her," Derek demanded, trying to push past Jacob. "Right now." Jacob didn't budge, his massive frame blocking the doorway. "It's late, and my wife doesn't need to answer questions from strangers showing up at our door." "Strangers?" Derek's face flushed red. "That's my..." "Derek," Cartwright cut him off with a hand on his shoulder. He studied Jacob with calculating eyes. "You got proof of this marriage?" Emma appeared at Jacob's shoulder then, wearing his shirt and looking calm despite the fear Jacob could feel radiating off her. She slipped her hand into his, and he squeezed it gently. "Is there a problem, honey?" she asked, her voice steady. Derek stared at her, fury and disbelief warring on his face. "Emma, what the hell is this? What are you doing?" She met his eyes without flinching. "I don't know who you think I am, but my name is Emma Thornwood. This is my husband, Jacob. And I'd appreciate it if you'd leave our property." "You lying?" Derek lunged forward, but Cartwright grabbed him. "Enough," the sheriff snapped. He looked at Emma, then at Jacob, clearly trying to decide if this was real. "If you're married, you'll have a license on file." "County clerk's office," Jacob said smoothly. "Feel free to check in the morning. But right now, you're on private property, harassing a married couple, and I'd like you to leave." Cartwright held his gaze for a long moment. Jacob could see him weighing his options, calculating whether pushing this further was worth the risk. Finally, he jerked his head toward the truck. "Let's go, Derek. We'll sort this out properly." Derek didn't move, his eyes locked on Emma with such hatred that Jacob instinctively pulled her closer. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You hear me? This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Emma said, and there was steel in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Goodbye, Derek." They watched from the window as the vehicles drove away, dust rising in the red glow of taillights. Only when they were gone did Emma's legs give out. Jacob caught her, guiding her to the couch. "They'll check," she said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "They'll find out we're not really married." "I know." Jacob sat beside her, mind already working through possibilities. "Which means we've got until morning to figure out our next move. You could keep running, get far away from here. I can give you money, help you get to Canada or somewhere Cartwright's reach doesn't extend." "Or?" Emma asked, because she could hear there was another option in his voice. Jacob looked at her, this stranger who'd hidden in his barn and somehow, in just a few hours, made his empty house feel like a home. "Or we make it real. We actually get married." Emma's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything. Look, I know it's crazy. We just met. But Emma, I've been alone on this ranch for 5 years, and in one night, you've reminded me what it feels like to have someone to talk to, someone to care about. And you need protection, real legal protection that even Cartwright can't touch. A marriage license would give you that." "But you don't know me," she protested, even as he could see her considering it. "I could be anyone. I could be lying about everything. You're not, though. I can tell." He took her hand gently. "I'm not asking for a real marriage, not right away. We'd have separate rooms, our own lives. But on paper, you'd be protected. You'd have time to figure out what you really want. And if after a while you want to leave, get the marriage annulled, I won't stop you. But at least you'd be safe while you decide." Emma was quiet for a long time, looking at their joined hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Why would you do this for me? Risk everything for someone you don't know?" Jacob thought about the question, about all the easy answers he could give. But Emma deserved the truth. "Because when I saw you in that barn, scared and hurt but still fighting, still running toward something better, I saw courage. Real courage. And because maybe we both deserve a chance at something different than what we've had. Maybe we can give that to each other." Emma's tears fell then, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, yes. Let's do it." They drove to Reno the next morning, crossing state lines to where Cartwright's influence didn't reach. The wedding was simple, quick, witnessed by strangers at the courthouse. But when Jacob slipped the simple gold band on Emma's finger and promised to honor and protect her, he meant every word. And when Emma repeated the vows, looking up at this gentle giant who'd appeared in her darkest hour like something out of a fairy tale, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. When they returned to the ranch as husband and wife, with legal documents to prove it, they found Cartwright waiting. But this time, when he demanded answers, Jacob handed him the marriage license. The sheriff's face went purple with rage, but there was nothing he could do. Emma was legally married, legally protected, and any attempt to harass her further would bring scrutiny he couldn't afford. Derek tried once more, showing up drunk and belligerent, but Jacob handled him with a calm firmness that left no room for argument. And after that, they stopped coming. The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. Emma had her own room, but she found herself spending more and more time in the kitchen with Jacob, cooking meals together. He taught her to ride horses and mend fences. She organized his chaotic paperwork and brought flowers into the house. They talked for hours on the porch, watching the sun set over the Montana mountains. And slowly, the marriage that had started as protection became something real. Neither of them could pinpoint exactly when it happened. Maybe it was the morning Jacob brought her coffee in bed without being asked, or the night Emma fell asleep on his shoulder during a movie and he carried her to her room with infinite gentleness. Maybe it was the 1,000 small kindnesses they showed each other, or the way they both started saying we instead of I. 3 months after their courthouse wedding, Emma knocked on Jacob's bedroom door late at night. When he answered, worried something was wrong, she looked up at him with clear eyes. "I don't want separate rooms anymore," she said simply. Jacob's face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious features. Yeah. I want this to be real, Jacob. All of it. If you want that too." He pulled her into his arms, this runaway girl who'd hidden in his barn and changed everything. "I've wanted that since the moment I saw you," he admitted. "I was just waiting for you to be ready." She kissed him then, and it felt like coming home. Years later, when people asked how they met, Jacob and Emma would exchange a smile and give the simple version. She got caught in a storm, he offered shelter, they fell in love. They never mentioned the fear or the desperation or the fact that their marriage had started as a shield against violence. But sometimes, late at night when they were alone, Emma would look at her husband and remember that terrifying moment when headlights swept across the windows, when he'd turned to her and offered an impossible solution. And she'd remember the way he'd stood in that doorway, unmovable as a mountain, and said those words that changed everything. "If they ask, you're my wife now." And she was. Really, truly was.